What a day today was. Woke up about 12:30. Was like, why don't I have any of the YouTube pile-up of notifications? Can't tell me nothing's happening. Oh, look, it's on Do Not Disturb. And I took it off Do Not Disturb, and it was like... And I had 2 missed texts and a phone call from the boss asking me to come in for the afternoon, so I did. And... started off with noticing that, well, first thing was I was asked to change the CO2. She couldn't get it to work right. We had to get the lines, fully, filled up or whatever. Eventually, I had to call the PepsiCo people about the fountain machine, and they were going to send repair people out to this little farm town, and then I got it working by running it until it gassed out. I called them and canceled it. And I don't know, man, if I was managing a gas station for a year, I would have learned how to do that by then. So then noticed that the freezer back half of the walk-in was not working. People trying to buy popsicles on a hot day and they were half melted. Had this one dude. I mean, it was a day for people having a day, I tell you what. There's one dude came up, he bought a popsicle, complained about it being half melted. I was like, okay, so where's the wrapper so I can ring that up? He goes, oh, I threw it away already. And then I couldn't find the wrapper, so I don't even know. So, just dumbassery. Got that took care of, moved on. Credit card machine ain't working. Off and on, off and on, off and on. All day. Cell phone service, blipping in and out. Off and on, all day. And at the spot behind the counter there are 5 bars, a full meter of signal. And it was still like, failure on connection. So, when I first got to the end of the gravel and got onto the old highway, there was some kind of a big fire going on to the south. No idea what that was about. There's a huge pall of smoke or dust or something. And yeah, just credit card machine fuckery all day. Boss told me to come in at 3, didn't tell me how long of a shift. I assumed it was to close, and then the girl comes in to close, and I'm like, hi, what are you doing here? She goes, I'm closing. What are you doing here? I said, she told me to come in at 3, and then she left without telling me she was leaving. I don't know. So, closer girl called the boss lady, and the boss ended up coming in. She had gone to get a bunch of Dr. Pepper products or something, so they needed me to do that and load stuff in or whatever. And I think the reason she had me come in was because there was a whole bunch of, this is a very short lady, and stuff she can't reach on the top shelf. Apparently she didn't want to get, I don't know. There is a step ladder there, but whatever, I'll take the hours, right? So I ended up working out a deal with the closer girl that she was going to go home and hang out with her kid instead. And I said, okie doke, I'll take the hours. Boss asked me to come in for mid-shift tomorrow, so I'm working for 4 to 6 hours or whatever it's going to be. I think it's about 6 hours. Agreed to work Sunday night close because it is the regular closer girl's birthday. She's like, I'm going to be so drunk. I'm like, all right, cool. I can do it. I'll do it. Boss had me make the call about the freezer to an HVAC company who may or may not have come in, but they didn't come into the store. I think the guy knew what the problem was. He said something about injecting something to get it to work. I don't know. I went and inspected inside the actual freezer, and where the fan units are inside, it was all covered in ice. And so when I told him that, when I called him, he says, yeah, it's going to have to thaw for a bit or something. And finally it kicked back in about 3 hours before close. Ice cream was still melty. Someone actually came in for ice cream, and I warned him. I said, man, you better check that because that cooler just started working. And she grabbed a pint of Ben & Jerry's and was like, oh, yeah, it's squishy. I said, yeah, I'm not really trying to sell a pint of flavored milk to anybody today like that. Before the sun started really going down, a dude pulled in to get gas. And apparently he caught a flat on entering the parking lot, but it was because he had to plug in his tire and fix a flat, and the plug had come out. Fix a flat was bubbling out. It was completely flat at the pump. Everybody's having trouble. The pay at the pump wasn't working. Keep saying see the cashier. So I'd just be like, yeah, let me approve it. You'll fill it. Come pay for it. So I went and got my air compressor pump thing out of my truck, helped the dude. I said, I'll air your tire up. We'll see if we can't get it to hold air long enough to at least get you out from the pump into the parking area. And so there's a whole thing. This dude was talking on something random. Not exactly random, but it was a topic that... It's possible the guy was on drugs. It's possible the guy was having some kind of a schizoid break or schizophrenic issue or a fugue or something, but it's also possible that he was dealing with something higher that I did not want to get tangled up with. He paid for everything. There was no trouble whatsoever, and he was fairly coherent other than he was just kind of hyper. But, I mean, I get hyped up when I'm manic, so, you know. The other thing that went today was that yesterday the phi angle flipped, and what that means is we had what is referred to as a sector boundary crossing, and effectively a short explanation of this is when the solar wind leaves the sun from these gaps in the corona, they call them coronal hole streams, that creates the solar wind. When it comes out from the sun, number one, the sun is rotating. So if you look at it top down, like you would on the charts and graphs from NASA and the NOAA, which when I say NOAA, that's what I'm referring to. They come out from these coronal holes, and it starts off straight, but the sun is rotating. So while it's going, the actual shape of the stream is kind of a spiral as it goes out. And it usually takes about 2 to 3 days for the solar wind to reach the Earth from where it is emitted at the sun, because at light speed, it takes 4 minutes, but the solar wind is traveling at like maybe Mach 2 at the most, which is way the hell slower than light speed. So another function or a feature of this is that this typically ejects out mostly toward the equatorial plane of the sun, but the Earth doesn't exactly orbit on the sun's equatorial plane. We're actually at an angle like this, so where the sun is here and we're at a slight angle. And of course, our planet's magnetic field extends out, you know, almost to the moon. The shape of this solar magnetic field is you've got a flat plane, almost like a disk, except that it is warpy and spirally because of this solar wind that puffs it up in places and it creates ripples. And so what happens is static electricity causes dust, gas, and plasma to kind of hang out near, well, it's made of plasma is the actual disk. It's just ionized gas. But there's dust and gas that kind of sticks around it for because of static electricity. Technically is the what we would consider north is the sun's south pole, and what we would consider south is the sun's north pole. But basically what happened was we transitioned from north to south in the solar magnetic field. What that means is that that's kind of wavy, warpy, spiralish disk that emanates out with the solar wind and slows down and spreads, and in between are kind of these lobes of magnetic field, but in the center is this kind of flat squish area where all the stuff that comes down off around, if it doesn't go into the pole of the sun, it flats out into this thing, and this reaches all the way out to the edge of the solar system to what they call the termination shock. It's almost imperceptible by that point, which is why you have things like the Kuiper Belt, which is a bunch of like dust and rocks and minor planets and whatever that are kind of where that stops, and the termination shock is way out, farther out than that. And it's basically the point at which the solar wind particles that come out from that stream have slowed down to the point they're no longer even moving at supersonic speeds. And it kind of tends to bunch up a lot of radiation there. That was what they call the termination shock when the Voyager probes passed through it and they encountered a wall of plasma. And some of these bogus clickbaity science pop-sci articles will talk about a wall of fire. No, not exactly. Not exactly. Yes, plasma and fire are composed of the same thing. No, it's not the same. Fire is visible. This is not. This has radio frequency interactions that you can pick up, but it's not visible. Otherwise, we would see it. So, the ripples and whatnot that happen 2 days ago on the telemetry for solar observatory satellites that orbit the sun or the Earth or points in between that monitor the solar activity, the phi angle started to jiggle. And what happens is there's a graph, say it's this thick, and the phi angle line stays here, this is up, this is down, right? And there'll be a point where it'll go and then a couple days later it'll go and it's flat down. And what that is we cross where this ripply thing, right, is moving around because it's rotating as well as it goes out, and we're moving through it. So when we go from the top part, we cross through that dust and gas and plasma and to the other side of the sun's magnetic field. The entire interaction between the sun and the earth shifts. That's why they call it a phi angle shift. Phi has to do with the equation that is used to determine something with it. I don't fully know it, but that's what it's referred to as. So they call it a sector boundary crossing. What that means is we go from the north sector to the south, or whichever, vice versa. Typically, this interferes with ground-based electronics a lot of the time. The NASA solar observatories were actually shut down over the weekend, and they just came back up in time to notice this. And what the telemetry showed was the same type of electromagnetic disturbance, geomagnetic flux or whatever, as a coronal mass ejection impact. However, there was no coronal mass ejection. The impact was this dust and plasma, which is kind of the same as what this coronal mass is made of, but it's not sun hot, it's just space temp. And when we pass through that, the dust and gas and everything else hits our magnetic field, kind of bucks it down a little bit. We get higher auroras, we get electromagnetic disturbances. It makes it a little more difficult in that phase of things for radio waves to propagate. Cell phone service is, of course, intermittent. Our magnetic field is also weakening very quickly, so even the more common events like this tend to become more strong. And it just coincided with an odd mood swing on my part, and a bunch of people just acting like their brains done fell out of their heads. Coincidence? Who knows? So, I mentioned something about it to a couple of customers where the things were really acting up, and they're like, yeah, the phone's being weird, and this and that and the other, and all this stuff is not acting right. And I said, yeah, I blame space weather. And they're like, oh, ho, 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 ho. And I was like, no, seriously, there's a thing that just happened 2 nights ago. Oh, yeah, sure, dude. I said, no, I'm talking about like NASA satellite telemetry talking about this. This is real science. Well, I don't know what you're talking about, so you must be crazy. They didn't call me crazy, but they looked at me with the crazy eyes, which means that they're crazy. I had one guy say something about, oh, like HARP? And I was like, not exactly. I know what that is, and this has nothing to do with that. This has to do with the shape of the sun's magnetic field in the solar system, and our orbit passes through it, in a nutshell. I said, but this thing definitely happened according to the telemetry, and as an effect, it seems like all this stuff is happening as well. It seems to happen every time. But it definitely seems to affect people. I mean, our brains are magnetic. We have electrical fields going on in there, quantum stuff going on in our brains. And the Earth's magnetic field is affected when these kind of things happen. I wonder, if we ever do have a galactic sector boundary crossing, as sometimes gets predicted in the catastrophism or whatever, what would that do to people's minds? Like, would we have anybody who survives the micronova rendered into just mindless savages unless they've got, the mental discipline and fortitude to recognize what it is? Because if you're aware of what it is, you're not caught up by it. I was a little bit off kilter today because of the anniversary from 2 years ago, and because of this dude with the flat tire in the pickup truck and some of the really weird stuff he was saying. But it wasn't random words. It was his perception of things around him and things that were going on, and I think he might have thought he was on a mission from God, and he's talking about saving people, and I'm like, look, dude, sometimes you can't save everyone. You might only be able to help people. And I just had a sense that there was a little bit of the will of God wrapped around this dude, so I wasn't gonna mess with him. And so I helped him on his way, did what I could, offered my blessing. Like I said, this dude paid for everything. It was not, he wasn't a criminal. He wasn't acting out or anything like that. And, but he was definitely in some type of emotional or mental distress that I don't exactly know the real root cause of. Nor is it my place to analyze or diagnose that. So I helped him on his way. I was not able to help him patch his tire, but this dude had a bunch of nuts and bolts and stuff in the back of his truck. And he found a bolt. He took this one bolt and he stuck it in, and it kind of held, but it let air out. And he went and got a different bolt, pulled that one out, and this big one was fat enough that between me and him, we threaded it into the belting of his tire so it would hold air so he could get to where he was going. And I aired him up all the way, had him pull it forward so it'd sit all the way down on the bolt and apply pressure and fill it up. He took care of business. He headed out. Somebody else come in right after, and what was that about? I said, I think that dude was running from the devil or something. And a couple of people that heard it were like, oh, ha, ha, running from the devil. Ha, ha. It's like, there are things in this world that operate from time to time that the regular people just do not understand. They are afraid of, or they pretend it doesn't exist. And, you know, a lot of these people were, you know, your typical, I go to work, I come home, you know, I make my food, I take my dump, I go to bed, you know, and it's what the Gnostics would have referred to as hylics. They're the ground level, material only, the mundane world of worldly human things, of mortality, is the only concern I have. And I'm obviously not of the hylic persuasion. I'm a little bit more of a pneumatic into the Gnostic level of things. This guy was not archontic, to be sure, but he was moved by something. And he's like, I've got this speech on this laptop, and if I could have got to the school with this kid in time, I could have read him the speech, and I'm like, yo, dude, I think I know what you're talking about. I really don't know. And I don't know enough to make any kind of judgment on this matter, because this is legit bordering on will of God stuff. And he's like, I understand. And he talked about something else that I don't want to get into, other than to say, I was like, you know, I told him, I recognize what you're talking about, and I'm not going to name it because I don't want to attract it. But I said, I do understand what you're feeling on that. And all I can say is that they expect you to act out. So don't. That's the only way you can conquer it, is to not. So I wished him well on his way, gave him a firm blessing, and he smiled when I did it, and he thought I was calling him back, and he go, oh, and he went on his way, and his truck tire held air, and he, I think, got to where he was going in the next town, and hopefully no drama came of it. But it wasn't my place to call the cops or do anything else like that either, because, like I said, it's, you know, I've known people who had legit mental illness issues that were having fugues or were having just a psychotic break from reality, and this dude was aware of his surroundings. He was aware of things. This was not the same thing. He was just like on a mission from God, is what he felt. And it's like, who am I to argue? You know, he's not talking about hurting anyone. He's talking about helping people, stopping people from being hurt. So I don't know. And yeah, then by the end of everything, the freezer started working, and I got everything but like half the floor mopping done and a bag of trash before the girl showed up to oversee my closing, and I got through. And the thing with the credit machine was it was down. We had an alternate means of scanning credit cards, but it doesn't report into the register system that prints the report. So I was expecting to be, I had all this list of purchases, like 75 something, in several different purchases that people had made that were confirmed charged on card, but they were not in the register system. And I was thinking I was going to be roughly that amount short on the till, and it ended up only being like, you know, I thought it was be like $70+, and it was like 20 something, and I was like, okay, I don't know what that's about. But it turned out I've been doing it wrong too, because you're supposed to like void those out, and it prints a ticket with the amount, and it knows how much it was on the card. And I was like, but that takes it out of the system, and the register's supposed to know that you sold something, so I thought you should cash it. But obviously there's something I don't fully understand about it, so I was like, okay, now I know what to do. But yeah, like I said, there was no real shortage on the till, which is kind of weird. But so yeah, I came out okay. Numbers were good. Closed the store. Got out at a reasonable time. But like I said, literally everybody was having a day. Everybody was off. Guy across the road from me, come in, because he hates Burlington. He's like, I avoid that fucking town no matter what. I'll go anywhere else. So he came in, stopped in, and some stuff before heading home from work or whatever. And I said, you having a weird day? How's that? And he says, yeah, you're telling me. I said, okay, good. So it ain't just me. And I said, yeah, it's a lot of people with a lot of stuff. And he was one of the ones that kind of looked at me, and I talked to him about science, and he's just like, But they will come to know with time that I don't spout shit, that I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm pretty deep into the research and learning on these things. And I don't mean research in the QAnon Trello board fucking boomerism sense of, oh, I seen it on a news article. I mean, I daily follow space weather updates. I don't get into the full-on catastrophism part. It's possible that shit will happen. There are some things he's pointing out, but it's always a thing that's just like the fucking imminent arrests that never come. Like, okay, I'm not saying it ain't gonna happen. I'm honestly, the things that the dude's talking about with the micronova and the galactic current sheet are far more likely to occur at some point than this other COINTELPRO nonsense to do with mortal human matters. So, yeah, it was just a wackadoo day. I'm gonna work tomorrow. Hope everything's kosher and hunky-dory. Don't know what other days I'll work besides the Sunday. Maybe I'll get at least one more day in on the week and I can get a decent paycheck and throw something down on my power bill before the end of the month. And yeah, so I guess I'm going to call it good there. A little longer than I thought, but I guess I needed to get all that stuff out. It took a minute to explain. Fucking eyelashes. So yeah, this has been June 15th, 2021. It has been a hell of a couple of years. Certainly the ride is not over. Things are looking up. Things are getting better. And I have to trust that they will continue to do so and do everything I can to help with that and to avoid negativities and such. So, hope everybody else had a good day today. If you had a whack day too, I feel you, man. I really do. It's kind of like full moons, except I looked at the moon the other night and it was a crescent. It's not full, but you're going to see some people tonight with full moon behavior. I guarantee it. So cut it short at the long point, and I'll talk to y'all later.